You're watching EVH Gear TV, brought to you by Mike's Music. Visit Mike's Music online for all your EVH and other gear needs. Microphones for EVH Gear TV are provided by Rode Microphones, and official Van Halen merchandise is provided by VanHalenStore.com. Now, here's your host from Ontario, Canada, EVH Gear artist Eric Broadbent.
Hey everyone, it's the weekend. Happy Friday to you all. I love Fridays. I love Friday evenings, and I'm joined tonight. I said in the newsletter today, we're cranking this one up to 11, and then we're putting the overdrive pedal on. I'm joined by Canadian sensation Annihilator's Jeff Waters, and he's going to prove to me in a moment, to all of us, how much of a Van Halen fan he is. Jeff, how the hell are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. Good to talk to a fellow Canadian, and especially about my favorite guitar player, right?
Fantastic. Yes, Jeff Waters is my favorite guitar player. There you go. And Eddie Van Halen. So we're going to rearrange our questions tonight because Jeff doesn't think, I'm not sure if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you want to prove to the EVH Gear TV fans that you're a diehard Van Halen fan. And I think within about 7.7 seconds, that's probably about, not at the speed that car is going to get up to 100 miles per hour that you got behind you there, you're going to prove to us how much of a Van Halen fan you are. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you have 10 seconds to prove, you take your time, but prove the Van Halen worthiness for us.
Well, you know what? First of all, I'm in my garage at home, just outside of Ottawa, Canada, and I need a lot more than 10 seconds because my whole bottom level of the house is mine, and I'm allowed to put as much as gear and fan stuff as I want, and there's a lot of Van Halen stuff down here. The studio's at the other end, rehearsal room, and the upstairs, not a chance. The only thing I could put up was an Angus Young picture that was signed by him that looks beautifully framed and all that stuff that fits a living room.
I'm just kidding about the 10 seconds.
She will let me put that up. That's it. So, which is ironic because he's my second favorite guitar player. Eddie's, of course, my first.
There you go.
So,
you got all the time in the world. You go for it.
Of course, I'm like a total Van Halen freaky fan. I'm on his website, EVH Store, and I buy things like license plates for my cars, right? That's it. That's 3 or 4 seconds, and I've just proven that I'm a fan. If I'm going to drive around.
Dip your camera down just a little bit more, just so we can see it just a bit more. There we go. VanHalenStore.com. There you go.
I covered up part of the license plate,
of course,
so I don't get any of these crazy people trying to do something. Identity theft.
That's right.
But I'm going to walk through the house. There's a dog in here.
Hello, pup.
Yep. His name's not Wolfgang, and it's not Eddie. It's Simon.
Simon.
Let me walk through here. I'm going to go through the non-Van Halen allowed living room and get down to the studio, get down to my floor. Okay, let me just try to go through. It's going to be blurry while I get down there.
That's all good.
And it's, as I was telling you before, we went on the air my girl's having a party. So out back there's a pile of people up there.
A bunch of guests. That's good. That's nice.
Yeah. Nobody cares, but I'm out of breath. Hang on a second. So we're coming downstairs to what's called, for legal and tax purposes, Water Sound Studios. Whoops. Looks like we got some Van Halen cabinets in the hallway. Looks like we may have some amps and cabinets down there.
I can see
right?
that. I can see that.
That's a wizard, but I think there's EVH stuff over there.
Yep.
It's a little TV room that we have set up for the band because I have my band and crew come over here for rehearsing, so I don't have to go over to Europe anymore to rehearse, and I can stay home a little more. Got the Mad Anthony sauces, right?
Nice.
And the little, I just go to the EVH store and I pick up all these little picks, and that's my favorite Van Halen album, Women and Children First, of course.
Fantastic.
There's more in here. There's guitar stuff, and let me just blur this out, walk down the hallway. Give me a second. I'm coming. Here we go. And I'll stabilize and get brightly lit and get my stuff together here. So this is in the studio. And there, see, I'm still on I'm proving that I'm a Van Halen fan.
Okay.
So I think we got a stool here somewhere. I ordered that last year. We got a Van Halen stool?
There we go. I have the same one. Love it.
There. What else we got? We have some studio guitars in here.
You need a few more, by the way.
That's one of my favorites. It's not an Eddie.
Nope,
it's
that's fine.
SG Diablo Gibson, given to me by Gibson a while ago, which is awesome.
Very nice.
This is one of the two guitars I use on my records now. This is, of course, the Wolfgang USA model here. Beautiful. That one's just one of these freaky guitars, maybe they're all like that because I've only really played that one and fell in love with it. But maybe they're all like that, the expensive USA models. But that one is like the dream studio guitar for me.
Yeah, beautiful ebony fretboard.
Oh, looky here, a Frankenstrat. We got a 5150.
Nice.
We've got some store-bought. You can see it.
Yeah, EVH Stripe Series. Yeah,
and that's not trying to be a jerk, but that's my studio bunch of stuff there. Let me see. And pedals, I have one of these freaks. I got to go on a site or go on eBay or go to a music store and get all his pedals, his wahs, and all his different versions of these, phasers and flangers, phase 90s and all that stuff. This is my actual pedal board I use in the studio.
Can you angle it down just a bit more for us too? Just a bit more if you can, just so we can see, just tip the camera a bit, the opposite way.
This way?
Yeah, there we go. Now, now we're getting the flanger in that. There we perfect.
Okay, so I love this Kirk Hammett wah. Of course, I got Eddie stuff, but these are my two secret weapons, the phase 90 and the flanger. Any of the models are just killer. But one of the things, sorry, on my, I forgot. Wait a minute. We got one more.
Sure.
Let my dog out. Look, this is what covers up my dirty mess of cables in one of my racks in the studio. I just buy the Van Halen towels.
Perfect. They're nice towels. They're thick too. I love those.
And I think there's one sitting on a chair there.
Yep.
Right? Okay, enough of that stuff. You guys get the point. I love Eddie Van Halen and everything he's done. So I'm letting my dog out, and I'm going to sit down and talk.
That sounds good. I think you proved it pretty quickly.
Good. So I'm good, right? You guys all
yeah.
know that
you can stay. You've got 86 more minutes. You can stay. You've earned your place.
Good.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump over to the chat and say hi to everybody. We got a bunch of people jumping in, and very, very thankful for that. So right off the get-go, I've got my beautiful better half, Poison Ivy Gross here. FNAF Gamers is jumping in, JD Gonzalez. And I think he's from Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure on that one. Regular here as well, Rob Ashby, as a big fan of yours, one of my high school friends, huge fan of your band from day one. Tactical Six String is jumping in, Frank C. Carlo Santin, another Canadian boy, he's up closer to your way, says happy Friday, good to be back here. Lyle Ketchum is in saying, hey gang, everyone, hope your day is well. Eric, hello to the guest, Jeff Waters, thank you. Let me see, Rob Ashby says hi, Poison. Dirty Apes is jumping in. Lyle Ketchum, Sin of 72 is jumping in saying, Jeff. Cloreen Baconskin, another regular here as well. Quentin James, a rocker through and through, appreciates your music. Saturday Night Special.
Hey, do you say bacon skin?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yep.
That's awesome.
It is. Now that's a Prince song, correct? I had to research that.
No idea.
Yeah, it's a Prince song. So I okay, that's a different name. So but Baconskin, as us Canadian guys, you probably had us at Bacon, right?
Yeah.
That no other question. It's sold at Bacon. Saturday Night Special saying Jeff is so underrated, and I agree too. People hear your voice, and you lead that band with the vocals, but the guitar playing is absolutely insane. And we're gonna get a lot of the guitar playing and a lot of your influences and things like that, and maybe your approach to guitar and stuff like that too. But there's a lot of these bands that we'll talk about tonight. We're gonna get some Canadian bands and some international bands, but there's a few people out there that play the guitar and they sing, and each of those instruments, the vocal and the guitar playing, is incredible. Now, I know this might make you kind of blush a little bit if I put you in the same leagues as Stevie Ray Vaughan and people like that, but Stevie Ray Vaughan, no, obviously not the same style by any means, but Stevie Ray Vaughan could get up on stage and be the singer and sing, and his voice would be just as good as the guitar playing and vice versa, and he just happens to mix the two together. You, in that same mindset, and the metal type of genre, can do that same thing too. So that's a real feather in your cap as well too. Thanks.
Well, I'm a little late bloomer on the vocals because I sang on 3 records of the 90s from our band Annihilator, kind of out of necessity because I went through a couple of different singers, and long story short, Annihilator is a solo project right from day one, and I would hire musicians to go in the studio like a drummer and even hire singers, and then we'd finish a record. And then I'd say, I got to find a bass player and another guitar player, and let's find some good guys and go on tour. And Europeans, because we've been literally our career's been 98% in Europe since 1989. The Europeans understood that very quickly. But when we had a little success in our early days in North America and then left, so to speak, when the scene for this kind of music kind of died at that point in 92, 93. Fans that when the internet came in, fans would discover us and all they'd see is this huge turnover of musicians and didn't really understand that this was kind of a weird way to run a band. It's kind of a band on tour, and we act like a band on tour and we get along like a band on tour. And then on every other area, it's a solo project basically. So it's a strange thing, but as far as singing, I did 3 albums in the 90s. I thought my career was probably done when I sang the first one in 1995. It was called King of the Kill, and I was very lucky that it was one of our biggest records. It was like one of those weird things where it went well. I don't have a great voice. It's just kind of like I really struggle, and I have to work really hard at it, not just playing guitar and singing, but the singing itself, right? And then I said, I'm tired of that in the 90s, get quote, a real singer. And I thought my singing career was done. And then a couple of years, I guess about 2 albums ago, my singer of 12, 13 years, his name was Dave, and he left unexpectedly. I couldn't keep him. I tried. And I said, hey, screw it, or at the latter end of our career, so to speak. Let's get out there and get a challenge. Because when I play guitar on stage, it's by myself. It's easy. And it's kind of like fun, relaxing, no stress. You can always hide behind the amps if you're feeling weird. The singer takes over for you, talking to the crowd, all that. So it was kind of an easy routine gig for me that I enjoyed because I just go out there and play guitar like I love. And there was nothing really challenging about that anymore to me. And then I said, I need a challenge. At 49 years old, I said, screw it, I'm going to sing again. And quite a bit of a ladder going up, getting better at it again. I'm trying to be better than I was in the earlier days. So I still got a few years of this to go, but we've done literally our last album, 2015, we did almost 18 months of touring. Wow. So I learned quickly, I got better as a singer, and then it went down because the stamina and the voice and not taking care of myself as good as I should have came into play. But the new record that we just did, I said, okay, I'm going to make this so I can sing it live, and let's just go out and have a good time and take care of yourself, and let's do this. So now I'm starting to get better at it, and I'm feeling more comfortable and confident about it finally. So
fantastic. Well, that's good. Obviously, it's a learning curve, and sometimes you go into these things. Okay, I'm going to be doing all the vocals now, and it's cool in the studio. And then obviously, as you mentioned, getting on the road, being healthy, taking care of your voice, taking care of your body, taking care of the chops on the guitar. It's a lot of things to focus your attention on, and none of them can really suffer.
You really, or I can, as like I'm a fan of heavy metal music, which is a big, broad term. I mean, bands like Kiss and AC/DC and Van Halen were called heavy metal by all the U.S. magazines, Circus, Cream, all that stuff. They were called heavy metal back in the,
but not really,
early 80s. And of course, they're hard rock bands. We know them now, but I like heavy metal in general, which range from every kind of melodic hard rock band to the heaviest noise, Cannibal Corpse, heavy stuff. So I like heavy metal and thrash metal and all these different styles of music, but I completely forgot what we were talking about. So take over.
No, it's all good. It's just basically how the people like yourself that can adapt the vocal and the guitar playing as an instrument that's equally of importance. So for sure.
I was before my mind went blank. I can really appreciate Dave Mustaine, James Hetfield, all these guys because I can, so to speak, do the guitar, metal playing, lead and rhythm and the writing and the studio work and stuff like that. But to actually play and sing, you just realize how good those two guys I mentioned are. Just phenomenal. And I guess unless you've tried it, you can be a fan or a musician, guitar player like me. You still cannot appreciate it until you actually try to do that, and try to do that for more than one show, and try and do it for 18 months and on a bus where you've got crazy airflow, people getting sick, you've got no sleep, sometimes, so many excuses. But basically, when you see Hetfield, Mustaine, there's a group of us that realize, oh my God, these guys are insanely talented, more so than the average fan would realize. You know what I mean?
I agree 100%, totally. And that's the thing too. A lot of people don't realize how hard it can be. It's like patting the head and rubbing the tummy sometimes. It's not as easy unless you're just following the rhythm. You can follow that melody, but a lot of times the vocal's not following what the guitar player is doing. In your case, you are doing. So it's not an easy task by any means. But let's jump back to the chat just for a quick second as well. So Island Winder, is it Island Winder? I think so. Island Winder says Jeff Waters, Allison Hell. JD Gonzalez says hell yeah. Jay's Tacos and Guitars says what's up everyone. Carlo Santin says my wife relegated me to the basement too, Jeff. I love it down there though. My favorite place on earth. And yes, we have our man caves for sure. And I'm very fortunate here as well too. I can pretty much spread the man cave out wherever I want. So the better half is great, but obviously it's kind of contained to one spot. But very, very cool. JD Gonzalez says I have the vinyl of Never Neverland.
All right.
Very cool. Vinyl is definitely. I'm really unpopular here in the house. Let me see here. Thomas Santiago is saying hi, Eric, Jeff, and everyone in the chat. Lau Ketchum says I question his devotion. That was talking about the Van Halen. Yeah.
Right.
He's kidding. Obviously, there's no question there. Jay's Tacos and Guitarist says, hey, Thomas. Rob Ashby says, sup, Eric and Jeff. Let's scroll down to the bottom. Sean Kearns is jumping in saying, hey, guys. Mike Michaels, nice setup. FNAF Gamers is showing money for some reason. I'm not sure what that is. Do we have to dance or something? I'm not sure what that is. I'm not going to dance tonight.
Hey, wait. I'm going to interject. You mean hard work and quit drinking in 1999, take care of business, because when you're a musician and you want to do this for a career, the only way you're going to survive is by taking care of business, because the state of the industry, as most people know that are the old school guys, you sure got to be clear-headed and work hard just to keep your band afloat and be able to keep doing this at 51 years old when most people in North America haven't heard of us.
Yep.
So our market is limited to Europe, which is huge for this kind of music. But,
yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, money is more like, actually, let's talk about money.
Let's
See
do
all these
that.
guitars?
Yeah.
I probably only paid for half of them if I'm lucky, because when you're in a band for so long and when you do well in one area like Europe, for example, companies will come to you and they'll say, hey, do you want to try our equipment out? And of course you say, of course I would like to try it out.
That's right.
But if I didn't like it morally, you should say, can I return it? Of course, if I can't use it or it's not for me. And most of the time they actually say, no, whether you use it or not, keep it. So a lot of times, a lot of the equipment you see, even the studio equipment, sometimes when you're around a lot for this long and you're doing stuff that some people like, you do get things given to you. You can imagine the big bands, they have warehouses full of this gear that are given to them and they have to sell them or just give them away or whatever. But it's kind of like a mechanic, like if you're a lifelong mechanic, you've got a hell of a toolkit. You've got a lot of tools. You've got a lot, and the companies will work with you because you're a well-known mechanic. You're going to promote them. So yeah, that's sometimes deceiving because there's a lot of guys that will get nice things, but it doesn't mean they've got millions of dollars sitting in the bank account or you know what I mean?
That's
but
right.
I mean, I obviously have a nice little comfy thing going on, but
oh yeah, of course.
It did take me 27 years of releasing 15 studio albums and a hell of a lot of ups and downs and personal issues and a lot of hard work to get what I got, so.
That's right. It's funny.
Answer.
You mentioned like the old magazines, like the Cream and the Hit Paraders and Circus and all those magazines. Now, I talk a lot about Kiss on this show because one of my second, third favorite bands. And I don't know the exact era of this, but I think it was right close to the Kiss Alive album. We recorded in Detroit, in Michigan, whatever. And someone had interviewed Paul Stanley and said, what's it like to be rich and famous? And he goes, well, I can tell you what it's like to be famous, right? Because, people just see these things and they think that you're rolling in the Lamborghinis. You got 7 Lamborghinis and all this other kind of stuff. Now, a lot of these artists are doing well. They're certainly not, looking for their next meal. Everything's taken care of, but it's not as glamorous as what some people think. And sometimes, some artists are almost afraid to show behind the curtain because it's just everyday, normal. Okay, I put my socks on the same way. I lace my shoes the same way. Now, of course, there's perks, some guitars and some amplifiers and some basses and drums and, things like that. And,
hot chicks.
Exactly. Yep. That works into the equation too, but it's not always the glam style, that people expect. And you'd be quite surprised, but it is very cool.
I've got it down to, like, it doesn't cover everything, but in general, it seems to me that the old schoolers that were around in the 80s or back, if, like, this is not me preaching or this is not fact, this is just sort of a general thing, is it seems to me that the ones that have sobered up or, if they were doing drugs or drinking and they've stopped, that makes you gives you a lot more time to look at things in life. And one of the first things you look at, for example, when I quit drinking, all of a sudden I had all this time on my hands. So the first thing I did is question where the money was going from all the things that we were doing. And that turns you hopefully into like, wait a minute, I got to take care of business. And I learned after 1999, or actually a little before that, but I started to learn about the business. And for a band that's not not at all doing really anything in North America ever since, 1992, you better have your brain together to keep things rolling. So I kept things rolling in Europe. But my point was, it seems like the old schoolers that have cleaned up end up, sure, they might be going on nostalgia tours or package tours and all this stuff, but some of these guys are making a lot of money and making a good living, and they're bands that you'll be like, are they still playing? And you won't realize that they're playing in front of 100,000 people in Europe, for example, and making a big paycheck. Now, it's not about the paycheck. My point was, the sort of more clean and sober people, they still have a career that's, I won't say easy, but they still have that ability to get out there and do those touring things. But for record sales, with the state of the industry now, if you've cleaned up, usually the old school guys that have a catalog of CDs or records and cassettes and 8-tracks, if business was taken care of and you can keep some of the guys together and you can keep clean a bit, you still, you really get record deals sometimes based on your previous catalog. So the new bands starting out don't have a history of having 15 records or 5 records, and a couple of them did really well. And at least you get some kind of record deal that's reasonable for the times. The new bands don't have anything behind them other than, hi, we're a new band. We don't have a previous track record of selling physical CDs. Man, I'm not saying you're screwed, but it's a totally different business now. I'm lucky that I had so many records and DVDs and things like that out overseas that when I go to get a record deal, there's no question whether I'll get one or not. It's just how good of a deal is it going to be?
Right.
The new bands that contact me for a decade now saying, how the heck what should we do? It's kind of like other than focus on learning different instruments, learning to write, taking care of business, learning, asking questions. If you know someone like me or someone like in another band that's doing okay, ask them questions. They're probably more than likely to help you, guide you there. But it sure is tough for new bands to make their way through this and actually pay the rent. And that's the minimum, pay the rent.
I know,
it's
even
just
survive.
Feed yourself. Man, I see so many bands that we tour with, younger bands and all that just have to pack it in, and they've got a 3-year run or 2 albums, and they're big. You see them in all the magazines, and then bang, they're
gone.
They have nothing. And it's not really necessarily their fault now. It's just that it's very hard to find other avenues. I do a lot of things around Annihilator, not just play in the band and make Annihilator music and tour, but I do a lot of other things outside, and did during the sort of downtimes we had from about 97 to 2007. I had my own studio. I invested in that very quickly in the early days. I learned about engineering. I went into even probably at the time the biggest studio in the world, Little Mountain Studios in Vancouver, and literally said, can I sweep and be a runner, clean up, get pizza, answer the phones, to learn about recording, because I knew the only way I was going to get out of that time frame was if I had my own studio and I was able to pocket the little bit of money that you get from the advances to put into my own recording instead of paying a studio $100,000 back then, $250,000.
Yeah.
Sure. I was putting in, getting $200,000 deals and buying gear and buying a house to put the gear in. So I got very lucky on how I did that, because there's no way I would have survived if I had my own studio. But I had to do jobs around that. I do guitar clinics. I represent Epiphone, sometimes Gibson. I just signed with Line 6, and I'll be doing a lot of work for them. And you have to get out off your butt and not expect things to come to you. You have to work your butt off to get anything out of it now, way more than you did in the early days. And I could just go on and preach, but I won't.
No, I like that. No, it's actually really good. And what I tell a lot of kids, like I get contacted by people saying, I'm, younger. When I say kids, I'm saying like the 19 to 20-year-olds. That's a kid to me. And they're going through school, and they, God bless them for, going to college and universities and maybe going through for a doctor or this or that. But also I say, look into business management as well. Taking some good business and marketing skills. If you're going to be a musician on the side, or maybe musician is going to be your main thing you're going for, and you got something to fall back on. Number one, the career is obviously a great thing to have. You need that for sure. Don't drop out of school. And business management, as you've alluded to, I mean, you need to run your band. You can love it to death, but you got to treat it like a business, even if you're not exactly even profiting at that exact moment. If it's not treated as a business, just quit right now, because you have to pay your babysitters. You have to feed your family.
Another one too is, obviously when you're younger, you can survive on less food and less of your apartment. What do you say?
Living space.
Level.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean, right? You can sleep on a used futon, which I did in 1987, 88. And I think another thing to add to what you're saying is it's great to have the business. It's great to, like I was suggesting, learn, like if you're a guitar player, learn how to play the bass.
Sure.
You don't have to be great at it, but learn how to write. If your singer doesn't show up, or like I just didn't rely on anyone. I learned how to engineer the little Fostex 4-track cassette machines they had back in the 80s to sort of that was my beginnings of being an engineer.
Sure.
And I wrote lyrics, and I'd sing on demos when the singer didn't show up. And that still applies today. The more you learn, and now you can't do that if you're going out and partying your face off, which is kind of falls in the face of being a rock star or metal. It's a different time. You really got to be together on this. But also, one thing I have found over the years is, and it's understandable, if you want to do this, I'm going to add to what you said, add to it maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give 100%. You can't just see that this is the other side of what you're saying. Most of the people that I know at any age that have sort of at least had a career in it and struggled and got by or went to the top, sure, there's a couple of lucky scenarios and maybe somebody had rich parents or something like that. But the majority of them got over the fear of, oh my God, if I move to another city by myself and put a band together, I'm all alone, or my parents don't want me to do this. They want me to go to college or school and they'll pay for a car and I watched 40, 50 people in my city, Ottawa, back in the mid 80s who were very talented musicians, even at, 18 years old, 20 years old, 16. And there was almost none of them got out because they all were too scared to leave, leave the job, to be starving, to not have a job. I know that sounds weird these days, not have a job, but you really have to, like Rhodes, Van Halen, you go through all the old school guys. Now this is a typical older guy saying this stuff. Of course, we all look at the last generation different, or two generations different. But these are guys that they didn't just, and I don't mean this in a bad way, they didn't just listen to Pearl Jam or Chili Peppers or Pearl Jam, play some chords and jump up and down, dye their hair and look like Flea. You know what I mean? Like Flea's amazing energy.
I know what you mean. Yep.
But that's what happened in the 90s. After 1993, the Pearl Jam Soundgarden, awesome.
Yeah.
But Pearl Jam, the Nirvanas, this came in, and now looking back at some of these bands, I wish they were back now because of where I'm seeing things are at now personally. But there was great bands out of the 90s. At the time, I didn't think so. I was like Slayer only. The 80s were the Van Halen, and like 80s were my Van Halen and Scorpions and Priest, Maiden, and then the 90s. My full-on Exodus, Slayer, it was a weird thing for me. But anyway, getting out and risking it all and taking that chance. If you do the job and the education, all that stuff, it's great that you have something to branch out at. But most of the guys that have been successful in the business, and artists and painters and everybody else and actors, they starved and they worked. Van Halen, Rhodes, all these guys, they never play guitar for an hour a day.
Oh, it's
they
all day.
play guitar, I'm guessing 12 to 14 hours a day. And when they weren't playing that 12, 14 hours a day, they were thinking it. I see what happens. In my opinion, most of the guys that have had a career in this was, sometimes it still is, but this was a full-time job. Eating and girlfriends, rent, everything else was secondary. And this was what you did. I liked there was a dead time in that Seattle scene kind of vibe. And even bands that I loved, like Metallica, were going out publicly saying, we're not doing any guitar solos. And then you had someone like Dan Dunnigan coming back from Disturbed actually saying, I think it was on Blabbermouth or something, I'm going to bring back guitar solos. And I was thinking, you're bringing back guitar solos. And what happens? I don't know why I said that, but that's the
that's
quote I
okay.
remember from Dan Dunnigan.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking he's bringing back solos. Well, okay, Eddie's been doing solos all along. He never stopped. But guys like the two Trivium guitar players, Corey and Matt, Alexi Lejo from Children of Bodom, I started seeing these younger guitar players sitting in their rooms for 8 hours a day, and you could tell by their playing. And they were downloading Tab from Randy Rhoads and Van Halen, and Akira Takasaki from Loudness, and Matthias Yabs from the Scorpions. And they were woodshedding. They were doing their 12 hours a day work. And all of a sudden, guitar solos came back. And that was like, for me, it was like, thank God, because when my favorite bands are announcing why play guitar solos,
it hurts you.
And Dan Dunnigan's going to bring the solo back. And I'm sitting here going, what's wrong? I mean, I almost wanted to just quit because it was kind of like, what's going on here? I just wanted to actually move over to Europe and stay there. But then you saw some bands in there continue and disregard all that stuff. They all went down to a lower level and didn't necessarily starve, but at times were hard compared to what they were used to. And now we've seen it rebound since the year 2000 and something. It's just rebounded back to people are realizing that the old school guys were great because they not only wrote songs, but they actually practiced their instruments like you're supposed to. You don't get that good by playing an hour a day.
No, exactly.
And going out and doing all these other things. Anyway, so I'm going to shut up.
There's nothing needed there. There's the old cliche of nothing good comes easy is never been more true. And as far as the Eddie Van Halens, as you mentioned too, like obviously getting at the breakfast table, he's got a guitar with him. He's at the dinner table, he's got a guitar with him. He falls asleep with the guitar. Another good example is Jason Becker, who I had on the show on New Year's Eve. Jason Becker, I read an interview somewhere. I wish I could quote the source, but he even had a guitar in his car where he would come up to a light, at a red light in LA, or wherever down, in the bigger states, you could be at a red light for 45 seconds or maybe a minute, and would actually grab a small guitar and play at a red light. That is dedication.
Yeah, I did that in the early days, and then as your career goes on, you hit a certain level. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of these groundbreaking new guitar players with groundbreaking new sounds. I'm a collection of the old school stuff. So I did all my time in hell, I think, from about the age of, whenever I was born in 66. So I think it was around 13 years old or so to about 22 years old. So maybe 9 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. I did the 10-hour, 12-hour a day and that. And as soon as I put my first record out, and it was an instant, at that time, a success. I think it was the biggest independent metal record in the world at the time, which is coming from complete poverty, literally, to this, touring around the world in nice buses and just getting attention, and things are going well. That's kind of when I slowed that down, because some guys will continue that. Mm-hmm. You see guys just nonstop continuing. I started realizing, I've got to basically co-manage the band, and then to manage the band, I got to take care of the recordings and most of the writing, producing, mixing, mastering, engineering, hiring the band stuff, looking after the accountant, legal, all this stuff. And I completely lost the drive to practice, and I still do. I still rarely practice guitar. When I pick up a guitar, I'm just jamming some basic AC/DC, Slayer, Metallica, Van Halen, Kiss, Scorpions. That's what I do to warm up in the dressing room at all the shows. I just jam the rhythm stuff. And so I've done my time in hell. I don't progress very much as a guitar player. But that's simply because there's so much else I need to be doing, and not lying on a beach. I mean, actually take care of the business end.
Exactly.
So I kind of regret that I didn't keep progressing, but I realized it wasn't a game of being as good as Eddie on solos, or as good as Malmsteen, or the guys that everybody was listening to at the time, Vi, and said, I became instantly aware as a teenager that all my friends were learning the solos. And Randy Rhoads solos and stuff. I was saying, wait a minute, Angus is my hero for his blues, Chuck Berry, and just his blues, phenomenal lead playing, underrated as an actual player, soloist. But the real guy, it's weird to say this for me because Angus is Malcolm. He's a songwriting genius.
I love that.
And one of the tightest players in the history of the world in the studio, or just in general.
It sure is.
And so all my friends were learning Van Halen solos, and I chose to listen to the rhythms, and therefore, and Judas Priest, Glenn Tipton, and KK Downing, I was listening to the rhythms while all my friends were learning the solos.
Right.
So what ended up happening is, after 4 or 5 years being a teenager and all of us listening to this stuff, I'm about the only one that actually wrote songs, because they were all into more of the Vi and the Momstein and the soloing stuff, and didn't catch on to the songwriting, the Rudolf Schenker,
Sure.
not just Michael Schenker and Matthias Yabs-Newley Roth playing solos, not just Van Halen solos. What about his rhythms, which are some of the most original and outstanding playing in the world? Randy Rhoads, okay, forget the solos, listen to his rhythms, his songwriting. So that's kind of where I got caught up. I divided guitar playing into songwriting, rhythm guitar, and solos, and tried not to do what all the other friends of mine were doing. And I'm the only one that got out of this thing, because when it ended in their teen years, they didn't have songs.
Yes.
You see what I mean? So that's kind of what I saw when I was younger here.
This is not putting an egotistical statement into your mind here, but someone like yourself who you manage the band. I mean, you manage the business of the band. You, the guitar player, the vocal, you arrange everything. It's almost like a captain of a ship. In a way, it's, as a captain of the ship is like he's got crew that makes him who he is as well too. But if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and most likely in this business will take advantage of you, and you have to have that direction. So I applaud you for that. Number one, having the direction, never stopping. The people that you mentioned, like the Angus Youngs and people like that of the world too, the Eddie Van Halens, let's take away the lead playing, let's focus on the rhythm. I know a million people right now that can play Eddie Van Halen like no tomorrow, but let's say, okay, now I want you just to do the rhythm track and forget the lead part and do the rhythm part. And I'll put myself in that same thing, so I'm not going to point fingers, because I'll put myself there too. Some of the things like I'm the One and tunes like that, you just can't do it. So there's a lot of little pieces of that puzzle that make a project survive or float, if we're talking about the ship.
Yeah, and remember, I was only, now that I think about it, I'm not talking about the kid or adult that loves these guitar players and bands and is jamming them and playing in weekend bar bands and having a freaking great time.
Mm-hmm.
I was only referring to the quote professional bands that want to have a long career at this, and I was kind of referring to that. That's the other side of the coin. Is screw it, just go have fun with your band when you can, have your normal life and enjoy the music and the playing and having the fun. I was kind of referring to those people that would ask me, what would you suggest if I wanted to do this for a career? You know what I mean?
And that's perfect. And that's the thing. Yeah. You ask yourself or ask your friend, if he comes up to you and says, I want to do music. Okay. Do you want to be a top 40 band, or, a cover band on the weekend, go, make a few bucks you're playing, have a few drinks and bring a couple bucks home to pay the babysitter? Then, okay, here's where you go. Do you want to go in? You want to be the long haul? Well, here's the sacrifices you're going to be looking at. You might lose families. You might lose your homes. You might lose whatever. Well, are you prepared for this? Right. And it is a different day today. As much as I love, and here's a question too, it wasn't even on the list tonight, but as much as I love social media and the internet the way it is today, and it provides an income and a livelihood for my family, I also like the old days. Little Junior and I were talking about this the other day. Remember, and you and I are only 2 years apart. I'm not going to say who's older or younger. I'll blame myself for being the older guy. I'll just make it easier for you, but we're 2 years apart. Sure. And you remember, playing with sticks in the backyard, and with our guitars, probably, you grew up kind of like me. You
don't mean Sticks Grand Illusion,
no,
Miss America.
I'm talking a branch like you break off a tree. Yeah.
Got it. Not drumsticks. Yeah.
Nope, not drumsticks. Just, that's all we had. And like, we don't have our games and our internet, and our devices and tablets and all that kind of stuff. So to entertain yourself was either, if you had an instrument, that's cool, that you're a lucky one.
You're Canadian, you're playing road hockey on the road.
Yes. Now, I gotta stop you there, because if I played road hockey where I lived in the country where the cars were driving, and now this is going to show our Canadians, like 80 kilometers an hour, right? Which is 50 for you Americans.
What's that?
So you don't have time to say car. It's like, boom, Eric's dead, So, yeah. So we didn't get to do that, but, burning stuff in the backyard and all kinds of Dukes of Hazzard stuff. So it was a different time. Yet it was kind of a cool time. Let's take away some of this cool stuff today. Go back to being a kid a little bit. What was it like for you, growing up before even maybe music got you?
Well, music got me at about 7 or 10 years old, because I was at a shopping mall. And my mom couldn't pry me away from this window that was there was a guitar player playing an acoustic guitar behind there. But no, I was a military kid. My dad was in the armed forces here, and yes, Canada does have an armed forces.
Yes, we do.
have one. We have one or two planes, I think. But
one's electric, one's gas.
Yeah, a wind-up plane. But my dad actually worked with the Americans and the British on some things, and did some pretty cool and, let's say, what do you say, classified stuff that I still to this day don't really understand or know. But so he was my hero.
Major respect to your dad.
Only because I didn't know what he did.
But still, he served. He served.
It was something where he had to retire early from because of the stress level. So I'm sure it wasn't a fun job for him. But we traveled around, lived in London, England, Air Force bases all over the place. So that was kind of fun. But then they decided, my mom put the hammer down and said, time to get settled around, I don't know the years, 7 years old or 10 years old. But I just went through school, and my nickname was Ozzy in school because I liked this harder edge music. And at the time, harder edge music was Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting by Elton John.
Oh, geez.
Because it had right, it had not the Nickelback version, but
no, I know a bit of distortion.
The guitar was loud and heavy, and then The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. If you listen to that mix, the guitars are so ripping loud on that, and I gravitated to that probably around 7, 8, 9 years old, to loud guitar, and I didn't realize it was guitar until a little later. My mom picked up, I liked guitar, so she got me an oversized acoustic guitar. Took a few years of lessons, but we're talking like once a week for 4 months, and you learn a couple of chords.
Sure.
Then I get a little older, 12 or whatever, and she said, well, I was into hockey, so let's try classical. And that was weird because I had to grow my fingernails on the other hand for classical.
Yeah.
No, on this hand.
Yep.
And the hockey coaches were like, you can't have these freaking nails, buddy. You're breaking them.
Yep.
And then I would always guard my hands. I ended up being a goalie, thinking that would help me, and it did the opposite.
Worse.
My blocker hand would instinctively, some reason, do the wrong thing and come this way to catch a puck. And I fractured my thumb twice, which is my picking thumb.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I just sort of went through, with my age, I went through disco on the radio. I was made for loving you. If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, Rod Stewart.
Yep.
So you had the Kiss disco song, you had Rod Stewart, and I kind of leaned towards, even in that era, the ones that still had the electric guitar, like Ace Frehley ripping solo, and the extended version on the 45 version of I Was Made for Loving You.
Yeah.
And then there was, or whatever the long version was of that. And then it started getting into, Kiss, Love Gun, Alive 2, and I went backwards, Alive 1, and the first albums. Once you hit Kiss, then you start hitting, Sabbath and, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden were coming up. So it got from hard rock music or disco to hard rock music to this. And I kind of stopped the lessons. I did 3 years classical, 4 years classical, and a couple years of jazz. That was too complex for my ADHD kind of brain, because I wasn't interested in it. When I'm interested in something, I could focus for 12 hours straight. But if I'm not really interested, I don't care about it.
Yeah.
So I basically, as a teen, went from everything from classical to pop on the radio to disco to hard rock, 70s hard rock, to The Knack was a big band for me. I really liked The Knack for some reason. And that was, I don't know the exact years, I'm guessing 78-ish, but I remember The Knack and Van Halen were pretty much touted as being the reason why labels came to Los Angeles. And then, from that hard rock, you had Ozzy when he left, you had Dio join Sabbath.
Yeah.
Mob Rules, Heaven and Hell. So I had this Iron Maiden. Now it started getting heavier. Scorpions were still in there with their melodic stuff. Loudness, Kira Takasaki, not much Deep Purple, not much Zeppelin, not much Stones, not that kind of stuff. Those were for the stoners. The drinkers were like in the
Grateful Dead,
the AC/DCs and the Kiss, right?
Sure.
And the stoners we called them were they smoked pot. So they were Jim Morrison, The Who, and Stones and Zeppelin. Then I was really getting into rock guitar. My mom bought me a cheapy guitar. It's like a Les Paul copy from a department store called Sears here.
Oh yeah, right. Yep.
$250. And I remember that was after Van Halen came out, and the striping of the guitars was made famous. And so the first thing I did with that black one was stripe it with white paint.
Nice.
And and I don't know, I was probably 14, 15, whatever it was. And then I know I'm scattered here, but then I remember the next thing I remember was around the Women and Children First era. It might have been Fair Warning, but maybe Women and Children First. They came to Ottawa at a place called the Civic Center, and I was too young to get in. And you know, I probably could have went if I was old enough. My parents probably would have lent me the given me the money. I ended up sitting with a security guard who nicely didn't shoo me off like everybody else was shooed away from the entrance. He let me sit on the concrete stairs and listen to the whole Van Halen concert for 2 hours while I could hear through the door, and he left the door open for me, and he was standing there. It's a really cool time. So I got to hear it. I was the most excited kid in the world after hearing that concert, and I didn't even care that I didn't get in because I was listening to Eddie and
you got it.
Roth apparently just sat on the edge of the stage with either a real or a fake bottle of Jack, and just sat there. I guess the band left the stage or sat down because my friends that went there said he just sat there for about 35, 40 minutes and at the edge of the stage and talked to them. And so I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So that was my only time I've ever almost seen Van Halen. All the times on the reunion tour where they were in Montreal and Toronto and even Ottawa, I was always on tour with Annihilator in Europe or South America. So if you can believe, one of the biggest Van Halen fans, like many of you are obviously, has never actually seen them live other than every other social media. Yeah. So I'm going to make I've told my fiance that it doesn't matter if Roth is still with them and they're doing their tour. The next one, we're just getting on a plane and we're going.
Fantastic. And if they do,
so anyway, that went from hard rock, heavy metal at the time, which was Motley Crue and Van Halen, AC/DC, Kiss, heavy metal, and then it progressed. I heard this band called Venom that threw me to this band called Slayer and Canadians, Razor Anvil Exciter's first albums, which at the time were like the most brilliant, influential albums that people don't realize. They influenced Metallica, everybody else. On the Razor Anvil Exciter's first albums. Then it got into, that thrash and heavier stuff. And I was, I guess, what we called here in Canada, a Slayer head. So basically, you could never wear a Skid Row shirt, or even Iron Maiden was almost considered
questionable.
You're not allowed to listen to Slayer and then also listen to Maiden and Lighter, Scorpions, for example.
Yeah.
And there was a weird mentality where even kids at my school would wear a Bon Jovi shirt or whatever the heck it was. If, for example, kids in high school here, you could get made fun of or even pushed around or spit on even. It was really ridiculous if you were wearing one of these poser bands. And the ironic thing about this poser thing, they called it back in the 80s, was if you look at the first Slayer promo photos and you look at the first Annihilator too, the very early days, it's makeup, spiked hair, and it's just like, okay, wait, what the hell is this poser thing about? We're doing the same thing. But anyway, so I progressed. So I had a background of, rock, heavy metal, thrash metal, a bit of punk and GBH, Dead Kennedys through my high school years. And therefore, now we're getting to the point, Annihilator is basically a compilation of all these favorite bands and guitar players that I loved. And I'm an old school guy, and I don't listen to much new stuff.
The funny thing is about that, no one, from outside looking in, now a new young fan coming in, hearing your discography for the first time, maybe they might hear your new record for the very first time and thinking, okay, these guys have no other influence other than metal, thrash, whatever you want to call it. And you've just described everything from a lot of the things I love to this day, the Kiss Dynasty, to Rod Stewart, to, I sometimes I'd feel embarrassed to show my iPod playlist. I have a huge playlist on my iPod. I got one of those old iPods, like the big ones. And a ton of stuff. I've got stuff from like all the bands that you've mentioned to Katy Perry, to Prince, to Michael Jackson. And I'm not afraid of it. And I'll put it on shuffle sometimes. And I try to never skip. If something comes on, I'm like, okay, I don't like it. I force myself to not skip it. So I can get in the mindset of, let's just hear the music and enjoy it. It's not the Van Halen, but it's of course it's not Van Halen. But it's really, really nice. And by absorbing all this stuff, that's where a lot of people go wrong these days. And sometimes even myself, I'll put myself in that shoe where I don't listen to enough. You have to broaden your horizons. And country, jazz, fusion, classical, perfect example. I've learned so much from my young son who's 11, and you and I talked about our kids off air, and how important kids can be in our lives. My son has introduced me to bands I would never listen to in a million years, and I've said this a few times on the show. Gorillaz. Absolutely love them to death. Like, they are neck and neck with Van Halen to me right now. And it's a completely different band. It's pop, a lot of it's R&B. But I went to the show in Toronto with him, and you can be won over in a second by seeing a band live. Never judge a book by its cover, and go to a live show. Support. Actually, that's the thing right there. Support live music. We need that more. You need that more. We all need that more.
We were at let me see, my gal and I were just a couple of nights ago. We're at Megadeth Scorpions, and they played in the province of Quebec here. Laval, and I think they're playing Toronto tonight. But so I went to hang out with Dave and the guys, and it was strange because you're watching Megadeth play. Actually, they had an incredible set. I've seen them many, many, many times, and this was a really good set. Mm-hmm. And they had fantastic sound, and it was one of those better nights, I think, for them. Yeah. And you see the crowd. The crowd is standing watching, yet they've got Megadeth shirts on. Nice. And it's a much different crowd now with social media and people wanting to film things. And I noticed this in Europe too. You still get, in Eastern Europe, you still get the hardcore 80s metal crowd acting like a hardcore 80s metal crowd. But you see people are a little more, it's not a bad thing. It's just reality. They're a bit more spoiled because now you don't have to wait a year to see that favorite band and not see anything except the odd little article in a TV guide image in a magazine. Yeah. Now you can just go and search on YouTube and watch 1,000 Van Halen shows if you want, right? Yep. So when kids are at the shows now, it's much more mellower for this kind of stuff. I noticed that. But with Megadeth, it was fantastic because it was another reality check of, we're in the year 2017 here, and then halfway through the set, the crowd became an 80s crowd. It was just fantastic to watch the transformation. Yeah. So there's still hope. Still hope.
There is for sure, and I love.
And back to your point. Yeah. Bottom line, what you were saying is good music is good music, right?
Exactly. I know we talked about this off the air too. We talked about bands. You're more of the old school guy, and so am I too. And I don't like a lot of new music just because, and it's no disrespect to any bands coming out today. It's just, it's all been done. But I've only said this 2 or 3 times in the show, but I heard this song again today, and I'm just I don't want to follow fads, but there's a band I love right now, Something Fierce. I turned my fiance on to them. Greta Van Fleet, if I got the name correct. These kids, they're brothers. If you haven't heard them yet, you got to look them up. Now, I'm as much of a Zeppelin fan as the next guy. I'm just a closet Zeppelin fan. I'll know their hits. I don't know their deep cuts by any means. I like the Kashmirs and I like things like that, but they sound like a young Led Zeppelin. They got the drums, they got the vocal melodies, and I think they're one of the biggest bands in the world right now, in my opinion. And it's so fresh. You hear something on the radio, and I usually don't listen to radio for that reason. I play the iPod because radio, I just don't like it. I hear this on the radio, and I'm like, wow, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, whoever put this together. It's refreshing. Yeah. It doesn't happen a lot, so you do have to count your blessings when that happens. The industry, as you know, is completely different. The labels are not like back in the day. You could, back in your day starting out, there were people that would, the old proverbial knock on the door, beating down the door to give you a record deal. Those deals don't happen anymore. Look at the things like the streaming services, your Spotify's and things like that. I mean, Gene Simmons is a big, one of the biggest people speaking about this, and Metallica was doing it with the Napsters and things like that too. I can totally appreciate where bands are losing the fact that they don't have the representation from the labels anymore. Their money is from everything they can do, from streaming services, from record sales, and now they're getting not only fractions of pennies, fractions of a cent of a penny for every stream. And he probably said, I'm sure Gene has said this, but I mean, it really is the majority of sort of not success stories, but continued career stories are going to be older bands that have the catalogs. And when they die out career wise, so to speak, or get too old, which is going to happen to everyone, what are we going to be left with? So that's kind of that's a tough call, man, because when you got bands that could only hang in there and do a couple of records before they have to break up because they can't afford to even survive,
I've seen guys on covers of magazines in Europe and in the States and Canada, and I know them personally. And you think a lot of them are, quote, famous, and the fans, and you want, like Gene Simmons's attitude.
Yeah.
You don't want you don't want them to think that you're not doing well.
Right.
So it's very natural and understandable why you would, want to flash your Camaro in the garage, or your studio, or, to let people know, hey, I'm still doing okay. We're doing well. Because if you're not doing well, people usually don't want to work with you or listen to your, they're not doing well, blah, blah, so, but it's like bands now have a hell of a tough time getting past a couple of records because they got to pay the bills, and they realize that there's not a career as in surviving.
Yeah.
Right.
You look at Yngwie Malmsteen, you mentioned him once too, and I'm going to use him as an example. He gets dogged a lot in the press because he's Yngwie Malmsteen, and he's kind of the Gene Simmons, except on guitar, and a heck of a lot better musician. No disrespect to Gene Simmons. But he gets dogged a lot in the press for egotistical things and things like that. But one thing he did say recently in an interview, and here again, I don't know who the interviewer was, I should say. He had said something just like what you're saying. There's like your bands, like let's say your Deep Purples, your Kiss, your Van Halens, your Led Zeppelins, your Rolling Stones, the Yngwie Malmsteens, and the Steve Vais and the Joe Satrianis of the Shredders aspect. There's not going to be any more of those guys anymore. There's still going to be some guitar heroes. There's going to be some kids popping up being guitar heroes, but there's never going to be those bands that are going to last anymore because the longevity isn't there. If you've made it 10, 15, 30, God for lucky enough to make 40, 50 years in the career of the music industry, then you're going to continue as long as you have your head on straight. You're not, falling a victim to the piranhas out there. You will do okay. But the new guys, it's a different story. And here's an example I use, and you might get a kick out of this because, we're Canadian boys. And here's an analogy I adapted as a young kid. When I say young kid, probably 10 or 11 years old. And image is everything. I have applied it to everything I've done in my life. I grew up on the farm, and my parents told me, they said, you can run our fruit stand. Did you have fruit stands in your area as a kid? And probably still do. You can go buy some tomatoes and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. Well, my parents said, you take the vegetables out to the road, you sell them, and, we'll give you most of the money. They might have even said even all the money, but it was money, right? I'm like, okay, here we go, great. So I go out there, and I'm already spending my money in my head. What I'm going to get the new Sony Walkman. It's going to be mine. I've been looking for this Walkman cassette player. No cars are stopping by me. And here again, this is on a highway. They're driving by crazy. I'm thinking, well, why aren't they stopping? So I figured, well, you got to look busy to be busy. So we had 4 or 5 cars on our farm, some farm vehicles, some of our family cars and things like that.
You parked them near the stand, right?
I sure did. I diagonal parked them like that. All of a sudden, within minutes, people were stopping, and all of a sudden, I went from wearing, an iron-on Van Halen T-shirt to a real Van Halen T-shirt. I could afford a real one, and then it was great. So that's something I think every person, if they can take any sense out of that, sell the sizzle, but be able to back it up as well too. Bands sometimes are more worried about their image before they get their music. Get the music, but worry about your image as well too. It's a big parcel that you have to juggle, and a lot of hats have to be worn.
Well, hopefully by the time they sit down and ask and they consider worrying about the music first, hopefully they've done that time in hell, I call it.
Yes.
Spending on a decade working your butt off or whatever it is to get good at what you're doing. But also, you don't have to be amazingly talented at all.
No.
At shredding or any of that crap. No. It's really down to what's your role, what do you think you're good at? Work hard at being the best at that, and maybe learn some things around that to help you in these crappy times. But, you don't have to be some phenomenal player. You just have to have something you're good at and
entertain.
Find it, work on it, right?
That's right. As you know, as a guitar player growing up, you played your dues in the bars, and playing covers. Those bar owners love you when you're making those people dance and buying drinks. And it's not all about the shredding. A lot of times, honestly, as much as we like to be guitar players and show off, a lot of times when we do our guitar solos, that's where the girls go back to get the drinks for their husbands and stuff like that, or boyfriends. So if you're entertaining, that's all it's all about. You got to entertain.
You also have to, whether you like it or not. Another tip is you just have to try to be good and honest to everybody in the business, because that old saying that us old timers use that, be good to the people on the way up because you'll need them on the way down.
Yeah.
I thought that was just a silly phrase, but that has been one of the top phrases that ended up applying to my life.
Mm-hmm.
is despite, North Americans just finding out about us on the internet and figuring, oh, the guy must be a real jerk because he has such a turnover of musicians. If I go over to Europe, for example, I actually do some deals over there that are pretty decent deals on a handshake basis. Like if you even have guys like, I remember when my aunt taught Bryan Adams here when he lived in school, and I worked out of Bryan Adams' studio, not his warehouse studio, a fancy one, but before he had this fancy Vancouver studio, he had a home studio, and I worked out of that. And it was, you really have to be good to people and honest. And I was doing handshake deals. I still do some of them. Like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of promoters, for example, will, our riders that we have when we do shows, festival shows or our headline stuff, most all of them, you've got riders and writing and contracts and all this stuff, but literally most of them at this point of my life and career, they're going to honor this stuff, deal or not. We have it in writing, but they honor it simply because, and
formality.
And for example, a lot of bands will fight to get half the money for a festival up front and then get paid the rest or 25% after the show or just before the show, all that kind of stuff. A lot of promoters simply just fire me all the money for this to pay for the expenses of flights and shipping and all this stuff that you need to pay for. They just do it because when you're around long enough, you're going to have a good reputation or a bad reputation. And if you got the good one, and those festival promoters have been around, the ones I work with, there's a mutual trust thing. And this is all, be good to them on your way up, because when you're going down, you need them. And that's applied to everything. I mean, the opportunities I got from not being a jerk to all these people because of my immaturity, my age, and my drinking in the early days, I really should have made a lot of people look at me and go, what a drunken idiot. But I even in those days, I realized, and my upbringing, I think, from my parents too helped, that there's only so far you go with your ego and so far you go with being a jerk and being dishonest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this business, you got to push things and kind of steer things the way you want them to go. But I was taught that when you're lying, flat out lying or being dishonest or being a jerk or mean to someone, if I ever do that, I feel guilty as hell. So it's in my makeup, so that's another thing too. I mean, and if you're all drugged out or drunk all the time, you're likely not going to be able to pull that off for very long and be good to people, right?
I agree. I almost look at
it is the party thing. I mean,
yeah.
The other side is a lot of, you see these quotes going up on news sites with rock stars or older guys saying, where are the real rock stars? And then you realize that's true. There are no people going out there and taking chances and saying stuff that's totally unacceptable these days, and against the norm, and doing crazy hotel room smashings and doing crazy stuff. It's a bit of both. We need people like that out there. We need frontmen.
Yeah.
You need Roth renting that whole floor of the hotel room and bringing the strippers in, and you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's just, you're recording a record in Vancouver or something.
Yeah.
You need these people, but at the same time, you need the Axl of 1989, this kind of stuff. We just don't have these guys anymore.
I know.
It's a tough fine line, because I don't want to be the one to do it because I'm, quote, mature and grown up now. And yet we need these guys out there.
I know, someone has to do it. I mean, everyone's playing it safe. I mean, you want to call it playing safe. I don't know what the term is, but a lot of these bands using backing tracks and I don't necessarily backing tracks, but things that are choreographed. Everything's done with Pro Tools, so the lights all the video screens are behind or triggered by Pro Tools. Everything is synced, and there's no inspiration or no improvisation I'm looking for. So you need a few of these people to kind of break the rules a little bit. Yeah. And like you say, everyone's playing it safe, and it's not that there's no more rock stars. It's just most of them have smartened up. You know what I mean? Yeah. We've grown up. Like, and I don't mean we, but all of them have grown up.
But that begs the question of where are the people following this stuff? Like when us old guys get old, and we're obviously getting older in families, and we're not running around as much, and our some guys are getting knee and hip replacements.
Sure.
And all this stuff's going on, and people are saying, oh, these are the days of the glory bands, the Guns N' Roses tour going out, AC/DC with Axl, hopefully Brian Johnson comes back, Van Halen hopefully with Roth, maybe Michael Anthony, if not, we got Wolfgang,
sure,
blah, blah, blah. That's great, but where are the follow-ups to this? I mean, we had them in the sense that we had you had the Soundgards, you had the Pearl Jams, you had all these different kinds of music. You had these 90s bands, you had your Limp Bizkit, Korn. You had these guys coming up who some of them still do records, but a lot of them would get in Slipknot. You could go through a whole list. It was almost like, okay, Marilyn Manson, okay, this is going to be the next long-term influential thing. And it turns out to be, most of them, pretty short-term, influential, huge, and then down. Yes. So it's not like a band would have a 30-year run. You're trying to hope that some band that you like has a 6-year run.
Yeah.
And can make it through 5 or 6 years.
That's optimistic.
You're not seeing, and then you can't blame that, 90s and 2000 up to 2008, 9, 10. You can't blame that on the internet and stuff like that. It's just a different culture, different kind of music. People are getting tired of certain things. Didn't have the excitement. Band members would split up really quickly.
Sure.
Just things where you don't have that thing where you've got Van Halen or Annihilator, or you've got Judas Priest switching singers. You've got Iron Maiden with a couple of singers, 3 singers in their career. You've got a band like Anthrax with tons of members, Testament, tons of members. You've got all these, and Exodus and all these. You've got these bands that are changing lineups and stuff, but they're still there. They're still there after all these years. They are not the key members of the band. Like, I'll say band Overkill, Bobby and Dee Dee, the singer and bass player. These guys have been slaving away since the 80s. And they don't get the big press. They get the metal press in Europe and some press in the States, and they do well. But I mean, they go to festivals and they play every show. Bobby plays like he's 25 years old every night, and he lives that. He's like the Roth of that kind of era. He lives to be that front man. That's his thing in his blood. They kept going, even rotating lineups when times were tougher in the 90s and onwards. The other band I really respect is, let me get that right. We got Testament, because these guys didn't stop. They went through so many lineup changes, and that's not because they're assholes. It's because the core guys, Chuck and Eric, the guitar player, it's not because they're assholes, just because they have a turnaround of musicians. Not at all. It's because times are tougher, crowds are smaller, sales were less. This kind of music wasn't happening after 93 for many years. And they didn't quit. Overkill didn't quit. Annihilator didn't quit in the various forms. There was no quitting for 20 years, and now the reunion's back. This is like, there's a group of bands that fans in heavy metal should take a look at that were in the middle levels that never stopped. And there's a very small group of these guys that never stopped going, right? Anyway, that's my plug for.
No, I love that. And that's the thing. Bands could get criticized for just, calling it a day and closing shop. And then they also get criticized for having 16 different guys in their band. It all goes to show that for the most of them, that's their lifeblood, that's their passion, their fuel to survive. And just applaud them for doing it. And I think despite the fact that technically speaking, the guys had millions in their bank account. Yeah, it's easier to afford to keep going.
I'll go to Slayer as an example. In the late 90s, I was considering just stopping what I was doing. I was writing with a guy from Nashville. What I was doing was writing the music for, essentially, it turned out it was crappy with a Rockman. You remember those Tom Scholz Rockman things, Boston guy?
I do, totally.
With that, I was writing with a Alesis SR16 drum machine. Somewhere around 1992, I was writing sort of poppy metal 80s ballad music. I'd send him to a guy in Nashville who was a well-known songwriter, and under a different name, we would release songs that would end up being country ballads because he's a country guy.
Sure.
So he'd write the lyrics, go into a studio, take this metal kids heavy metal ballad done horribly, and get the session guys in, and they turn that metal ballad into a country ballad. And so I made a bit of a living for a while and having, some songs on TV shows like Entertainment Tonight, where John Tesh was the main guy there, but I got a song on there,
nice.
Which was rare. Deep Space Nine, American Cancer Society. There was a whole pile of stuff that TV shows in Canada, Cold Squad, all these things I would do. And also some well-known, usually female pop and country artists. So I made a bit of a living for a while there in the downtimes of the metal stuff.
What the hell was my point? Was I showing off? No, it
No,
was something else.
well, it's
Getting at.
it's adapting. Like you talked about a guitar player learning how to bass. You need to be a chameleon in the business if you want to survive. So in your
What were we
case,
talking about before, though? What were we talking about before that? You remember?
just about the lineups with people, the band still going today, not
Yeah.
giving up, yeah, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I essentially used the time for the 10 years down period that I had, and I would literally dump that back into going over to Europe and putting records up and touring and losing money on the touring, but putting my own money I made from the other stuff back into this.
yeah,
Because despite I was doing that, and I was very tempted by one of the big video game companies in Vancouver asked me to head one of the production teams for the music on video games. And they said I could work out of my Vancouver studio, my home studio, most of the time, and I come in and do the final stuff there. And the paycheck at the time was amazing. It was, even now, it would be like, wow, that's a lot of money.
yep,
And they would release me and let me do Annihilator festivals in the summer,
yeah,
pre-arranged. And I was tempted by many other things. And it came back to, forget money and survival, forget even survival. What is it that I love doing?
yeah.
And that was a no-brainer. And I stopped all of that and just stuck with this. But I was going somewhere else, but I lost my brain.
That's okay. And I won't say the name either, but I have a feeling I know who that game is. I'm a bit of a gamer myself too, so I think I know who that company may be. Yeah, there you go. That's cool though.
Yeah.
So yeah, you stay true to what your heart believes in. I'm going to jump over to the chat, say hi to a few people. I'm going to come back. A couple questions on deck. I want to ask you. Number one, when we come back, I want to ask you about your recent endorsements. We just touched base on Epiphone and Line 6. We'll talk about how that's working out for you and what you like about them. And we're also going to get into what it is about Eddie Van Halen that just,
Yes.
makes what is it about him that makes him tick? So jumping back over to the chat real quick, JD Gonzalez, we had mentioned, I thought he was from Venezuela. He confirmed that. And I have a very bad short-term memory sometimes. Let me see here. Rob Ashby says Stonewall's a killer tune. Constance is jumping in saying, hey. Let me see here. Poison Ivy saying hi to the folks there as well too. Pat Ellsworth says, please, Annihilator, come to San Diego. And here's the thing too, we hear this a lot in the show with any guest I have in the show. Come to Boise, Idaho, come to Michigan, come to Venezuela, come to wherever. And I don't want to speak for you. I know you would probably go to any next door neighbors in Florida's basement and play, but it has to be arranged. Tours have to be provided and things like that. It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I get most flack because in some respects I don't have a good excuse, part of it, for not being in even my own country, Canada. What happened essentially was in '93. That's when literally record companies were sending memos out, dropping every band that has the word metal in their bio.
Yeah.
And that was no shit.
I
They
believe
were
it.
dropping everyone. The only ones that survived were the ones that changed the names of their band and wrote different kind of music.
Yep.
You had, I won't even get into examples, but so in North America, for the heavy metal, thrash metal thing, it was essentially gone. You had bands like Iron Maiden switching singers to Blaze Bayley and not so much coming to the States and playing to smaller crowds when they did here. They were always big live around the world anyway, no matter what. But you had Judas Priest, who went from Rob Halford to Rip Owens. And I toured, I've been lucky. I toured twice with Judas Priest on some big ass tours. Painkiller, we did the European Painkiller tour with them for 2 or 3 months. And then they asked us back in 2004 to do the Reunited tour when Rob Halford rejoined.
Yep.
But you had Priest after that Painkiller tour we did, literally a few years later, from playing arenas and stadiums, even in North America in Vancouver, playing a club in Vancouver. So I was watching Rip Owens and Priest, the band that I played with and was stadium arena band. They kept going. Even though you would think as a fan, wow, that must be a little bit of a hit for these guys to go from there to there on the venues and attendance. But they didn't give a damn. They played just as hard as they did before. Slayer was definitely the band that I put at the top of the list out of all of them for, you could say Metallica, but they changed. They stopped playing solos. They changed their image. They changed their music. Producer, they did the whole change. Slayer, actually, I admire the most because they went from those same arenas Priest were playing in to playing clubs in Vancouver where I lived. And I watched when I was at my most depressed. That's where I was going before. And my most depressed about this business in the late 90s, I went to, I'll go see Slayer, right? And that's one of my favorite bands. And I sat there, and I remember I was sitting there. Imagine at a Slayer concert, I'm sitting on the edge where they had to step up and some tables. I ordered nachos, okay? And I'm watching the intro, the curtain, whatever, and the intro thing's going on. And I'm eating nachos, watching one of my favorite bands.
Yep.
That's not what I would have ever imagined doing before. But I was so bummed out about all this stuff. And I went to see Slayer, probably, I thought, for the last time, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's depressing when this is your life and the state of that kind of music has just gone to hell.
Sure.
Then the curtain goes down or whatever, the intro's done. And I watched Kerry King and the guys play like they were selling out the Vancouver Peony Coliseum, the big arena at the time. They played the same or better and more intense than they did. And they were in a club called the Commodore.
Okay.
And that was actually a kick in the ass. And the reason I sort of in 1999, I just said, that's it. Quit drinking, get my shit together. This is what I love. And if these guys can go from being up here and playing down here and love it just as much or more than they were here, then stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get out and do what you love to do. You have the ability to do it. If you have to take other jobs to support what you want to do, you do it. And Slayer would have kind of the turnaround band for me. Anyway, on with your questions.
I love it. No, I love that. And here's something you'll appreciate too. This is something from Van Halen Rising from Greg Renoff's book, a really cool thing. Back in the day when Van Halen's planned the backyard parties for starting off with 5 people to 5,000 people, some of these big ass parties, David Lee Roth was always saying, okay, let's close our eyes, let's squint at the stars, and let's pretend this is Madison Square Garden. Now, David Lee Roth is on stage, and as much as, and I love him for this, he'll say, let's squint our eyes, let's pretend that we're in the backyard again. And these guys will do that. They'll play in Slayer, as you alluded to. They'll kick you in the ass in front of 500 people. I'm not sure how big that room is, but we'll say 500,000 people.
That was You mean the club I was talking about?
The Commodore there.
Commodore is about 1,200, I think.
Okay, so 1,200. So yeah, a little bit bigger, but still playing 1,200.
12,000 they were doing before a few years earlier.
Exactly. So, and they're still doing it. So huge kudos to them. So we're going to come back in just a second and talk about some gear. So Sam VH 5150, my good friend from Los Angeles, is joining us. Rob Ashby was talking about the singing and playing, very hard to do. Let me see here. Carlo Santin says we're getting some new VH music thanks to Gene Simmons and the Vault. You've heard about that probably, right? The future.
Yeah, I heard a bit about that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so Eddie and Alex playing on the Love Gun demos and Christine 16 and some things like that. So that's gonna be nice. And I haven't heard any negativity coming from the Van Halen camp. So they probably don't have much say at this point. There's probably some releases that have been signed. So that's coming out soon. I'm just happy for I'm not going to spend $2,000 to buy it and I'm not going to spend the $20,000 or $50,000 for Gene to come deliver it to me. So whoever gets it first,
$50 grand.
Yep, send it to me. I'll take an MP3. I don't condone that. I'm just kidding. But that's what everyone's waiting for, is someone to get it so we can hear it. Here's a question from Sinner. Says, now I'm not sure if you're equipped for this. I never even asked you. Are you able to play anything right now? Do you have anything you can plug in and play anything for us, a riff or anything like that? Or is it something that maybe...
Actually, if you can see my... all my gear's in Europe, and I've just got some suitcases, and I don't think I've got anything set up. I think I got a little Marshall in there, but...
No, that's okay.
And when I'm in the off season, which could even mean 2 weeks,
yep,
which is where I'm at right now. We just came back from some European festivals and a press trip. One of the things going way back, and then this is boring, so I'll make it fast.
That's all good.
When I said I played hockey, and for some reason I had the instinct with the blocker hand as a goalie to when I had a slap shot that was blistering, like really hard shot. My gut reaction on this side was to actually put the blocker up, which is the wrong side. You want to stop it like that.
Sure.
This side isn't really padded, and I fractured my thumb twice.
Oh.
So what I found as I'm getting older, and I had some x-rays done years ago, is the doctor basically said, just warm up properly a week, 8-9 days with the practicing and just play rhythms, just simple rhythms.
Nuts.
Again, ACDs. I remember reading something Eddie, I think it said, when he was warming up for quite a while, he would just literally play AC/DC riffs to warm up, rhythms. And I think I remember that from the 80s. But I intentionally don't practice until a date when I know I have to get ready for a tour or recording a record or writing or whatever.
Yep.
So I try not to touch the guitar when I don't have to. I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you play guitar for, for 30, 40, whatever the hell it is, 40 years, you're gonna wear down a lot of muscles in your body and bones and whatever you call it. So I think a lot of guys I know have tendonitis and a whole bunch of screwed up problems and operations needed. And
You gotta be careful.
I think that's how I'm saving my butt. So yeah, I'm not even ready to play.
No problem.
I put my Epiphone here just for show.
Well, let's jump to that right now, because I just saw the Line 6. Let's go to the Epiphone. I've got you on the big camera right now. So you've been working with Epiphone for a long time. Talk about the Epiphone first, and tell us about your relationship with them, and then now with the Line 6 as well too.
Yeah, Epiphone, originally in 2000, I don't know when, it's 2007.
Mm-hmm.
We were touring, I think Trivium came with us. It was 2007, and I'd never done a lot of endorsements in the early days. I wasn't a networking guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of kept to myself. The internet wasn't really used pre that time. So I always, it's not like that I expected things to come to me, but you kind of did in those days, that a manager would get things done for you. My manager wasn't. But in 2007, I got the opportunity to meet with the Gibson guys in Berlin, Germany, and they said they wanted to endorse me. And I'm like, holy cow,
Nice.
What kid or adult or a guitar player wouldn't be like, holy crap, I got to look at this. This is amazing. Gibson are interested. Signature guitar, Jeff Waters signature thing. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And actually, it was kind of cool. I feel good about this morally as a metal musician. When we got talking about the guitar, they were talking about selling it for almost $4,000 US. And I stopped, and I had a light bulb go off, and I forgot who they were and what the name is and the legend. And I stopped them and said, I can't do a guitar for $4,000. Nobody's going to buy it. I mean, what's the point of doing that? I mean, it's great that I would get my signature on the headstock, and
sure,
wow, great. But I thought more along the lines of, well, couldn't we make one that's like cheaper that kids can afford,
mm-hmm.
that are into what I do and over there? And there's a fair amount of kids in Europe and older kids
mm-hmm.
that like Annihilator and what I'm doing. And we kind of argued back and forth about, the cost of the guitar and the quality. And then I realized it, or they realized, they looked at me and they went, I remember going back again, looked at me, and the guy, Ulf, the boss, said, you know what? You need to, I think we should hook you up with Epiphone. It's our sister company. We're related and connected,
mm-hmm.
but not, there's a dividing line. They
sure.
are two separate companies. But why don't we pass the Epiphone? There are, I was going to say lower cost, but it is lower cost. That's reality
mm-hmm.
than Gibson. However, they've had many big blocks of time in their history and recent history where they've come up with some amazing guitars for a lower cost. And I thought about it and went, oh yeah, that makes the most sense of all.
Sure.
When I was 18, I could not go and buy, a $4,000 guitar. It was like 400 would be a stretch. So
sure.
I hooked up with Epiphone then, and it was actually, for me in Europe, it was the perfect fit, because they were talking about selling a guitar for about 500 euros, which is about 700 US,
mm-hmm.
Canadian, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there we go. There's a balance. It's on the higher end of what I could afford as a kid, but it's now 2010.
Yeah.
And they did a signature model, and I made sure that the guitar could do I called it the chunk of the Gary Holt from Exodus and the Hetfield
mm-hmm.
for the rhythm, but also the fretboard was made out of material, even at low cost, that could get the squeals of an Angus, a Matthias, and a Van Halen.
Nice.
That's my sort of
measuring stick.
Yeah, exactly. I needed to get those pick harmonic squeals on that neck, and you had to be able to hit them real easy. And they came up with this whole bunch of different necks, and I went and they just blindly sent it to me. I don't know a lot about the technical stuff about
mm-hmm.
guitar stuff.
Sure.
How it's made and woods and all that. And I just picked the one that I liked the best, and they go, thank you, because that's the cheapest one that we can make.
Wow. There you go.
And they were very happy with me then. And we just tried to put in good pickups. I couldn't use the Epiphone pickups at the time.
Yeah.
In 2010, I said, we have to do Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not normal to put a Gibson on an Epiphone.
Sure.
But they bent the rules, and we did that. And it was actually a huge seller in Europe. So now I realize why Zach Wilde was so happy with Epiphone and Gibson, and why Slash and these guys put out these guitars, because even the Epiphone versions are fantastic. They're lower cost, and those are the ones to look at if you don't have a pile of money.
Yep.
Because a lot of them, if you pick the right ones, are fantastic. I mean, all styles, Les Pauls, the Signature series by other artists. it's like other companies. You find the good ones, and you find the ones that maybe aren't for you. And you see why some of these guys, for example, Zach, would literally make probably more money on his guitar endorsement than he would playing in Black Label and Aussie and everything else combined, because I found out you get this little percentage of the sale price or whatever it is of the guitar on the deal. And if you sell thousands of these things and you look at the price, you go, oh my God, there's money in it too. So that was a bonus for me. Kids afford it. They bought it, thanked me for it, which was kind of not, it's Epiphone and myself, I guess. And it was a hit guitar. So we did another run, I think a year ago. We call it the Annihilation 2 because the first one was called Epiphone Annihilation.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, well, let's step it up, because I see Rob from Machine Head and some of these, Brendan was getting this really nice Snow Falcon Epiphone V, and I'm a V guy, so I was like, okay, can we step it up and do a top of the line Epiphone? And the president, Jim Rosenberg, goes, actually, we were thinking about doing it even cheaper than the last one.
Oh no.
So, and I was like, oh no, right? And then I realized what the point is. His point wasn't to make the money. It was like, Waters, these other guys can have the more expensive ones. People seem to like you over there because you're providing them with something they can actually afford, and it's good enough for you to use on stage, so they're going to feel comfortable grabbing it. So that's kind of my shtick with Epiphone is I'm kind of selling affordable guitars and promoting them and actually using them on stage, which is not always what happens, right?
I agree with that. That's fantastic. Let's flip the coin over to line 6. So line 6 now is kind of your go-to unit for effects and everything. Tell us about that.
Well, you can't see here, but there's, I don't know where it is. It's an EVH somewhere in the corner. I didn't even know.
Yeah, we see it. We see it.
One or two there. Using Kettner Grandmeister, which I used for years. It's a little tiny amp, very portable, good amp. Wizard amp. I've got Wizards down there. I got EVHs in the other rooms. Marshalls. Yeah, just lots of really cool things. And we got a Fractal Kemper, a Line 6 Helix in for the new album. And I brought my bass player, his name's Rich from the UK, bass player for the last few years, to help me with the music writing, because he was a great guy to bounce ideas off of, a very smart guy into sort of the math metal stuff meets old school. So I needed somebody to run stuff by and say, does this suck, or is this too much like Slayer or Maiden or Metallica? Just guide me in the right place. As well as the technical end. He's I think he's an engineer at home too. So we said, let's just A/B all these amps and cabs. And I've got, the awesome you got the app on your phone that can move the microphone. Different positions in front of the speakers.
Yep.
And we got the cabs, so the EVH can Marshall cabs in the other room and homemade cabs and everything. And we ended up A/Bing everything. And at the end of it, we intentionally scrambled all the files, playing the same guitar, the same riff, same everything. Same levels. We made sure that it was all the same. We tried to get the EQs and everything pretty similar, so nothing really stood out as being totally different. And again, we went through the EVHs, which I'd used on some previous records. And the blind winner was this Line 6 Helix, which I honestly thought would be the last thing.
Yeah.
Because Campers seem to be the company that's nailed it. All the companies, a lot of bands in Europe are, they've got, each guitar player has a rack with 2 Kempers, maybe 4 if they're a really big band.
Sure.
That's been the rage on the touring end for quite a while now. And then Fractal's been doing well, I guess. And Line 6 came up with this Helix, and I had to get it. I think I bought this one myself from the store, because sometimes I, will get freebies, like I told you before.
Yeah, sometimes out of your pocket.
I bought it because simply I just wanted to see if it was any good.
Sure.
So I initially ruled it out. Then we did the blind test, and that was the guy who we picked for the record. And it was unbelievable, because I'd always thought the modeling amps, these kind of things, especially Line 6, they have what I think over the history of their Vetas and their Pods and Pod Pros over the years, they had that, one of the first people in the digital realm with good amps. And I had the Veta on tour back in 2002 or something. They always had the best clean sound. I always say the best clean sound I ever heard was Mark Tremonti and Creed live.
Yeah, sure.
And that was the clean sound he had live blew me away when I saw a concert. And so the Line 6 always had good, amazing clean tones. and some pretty cool effects.
Mm-hmm.
But metal, you need that bloody EVH Marshall Wizard. You need that tube
Mesa,
chunk.
whatever,
You gotta have
yeah.
that. Gotta have maybe a boogie.
Yeah.
You've got to have that for the gunk, gunk, gunk. So I ruled out the Line 6 anyway because right away I couldn't find the gunk right away. So I
Sure.
went on to the next thing. Fractal, couldn't get it.
Yep.
Kemper, I couldn't really get it. The EVH and the Wizard won
Mm-hmm.
in my first round. And then I said, okay, let's do the rest of them. And we blindly picked this Line 6 because when I screwed with the thing, I realized all you got to do is get over that learning curve.
Yes.
And that was the one I could tweak easiest, straight to the point, get the chunk on the rhythms that I couldn't get out of any of the other modeling things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they could only be gotten from Marshall's, Boogies, Wizards,
Right.
EVHs. So I was very happily surprised because for a band that is not a major band, even in Europe, we do very well. We headline a lot of festivals and we do well. We're still not up at the Slayer level, for example, or
Sure.
that over in Europe. Pretty close. We co-headline them in
Yeah.
Sofia, Bulgaria a few years back, but we're still not there.
Mm-hmm.
We're very happy where we are, but we're not at that level. So we have to watch our budget a little bit more.
Of course.
And taking these little Hughes and Kettner amps for years they were good amps, but they were really 51% because we could put them in suitcases.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to pay $10,000 every time we did a festival run
That's right.
through Europe. So when I surprisingly, whatever that means,
Mm-hmm.
found out that this Helix thing was perfect, all we do is we just bring one rack each as a guitar player,
Carry on, practically.
one pedal board and a backup pedal board. We didn't even use it on our last festival run that we said, screw the backup. We actually have played the whole summer without a backup amp, which is the dumbest thing
Wow.
any band could ever do.
Sure.
And it was kind of just being dangerous. Let's just try it. We had, the backline companies and festivals would provide
Sure.
EVHs and Marshalls for us, but we never actually sound checked them and hooked them up. Occasionally we put a mic in front and say, if this Helix goes down,
Yeah. Switch.
scramble and just quickly run it up. I know what the settings should be. Let's just do it.
Mm-hmm.
We never had the problem yet. And it's portable, it's light, and it fits in suitcases. And it's got the chunk. So now you add that to the fact that the Helix has even better clean tones than before
Mhm.
all these years. And it's got the most amazing effects. And effects aren't really something I use with Annihilator.
Sure. Of course.
But, we snuck some in where you think you're hearing a bass, but you're actually hearing the guitar.
Yeah.
This
some
stuff's
doubling and
so
things like
amazing
that. Yeah.
to play with. Anyway, so that's my plug for that. Not because I want to plug them and I'm endorsed by them, but
No, that's nice.
because it's like a dream rig right now for us. It's just too simple. We don't even have cabinets. Like I said, we don't even run the sound out of that Helix through a power amp through stage cabinets.
No,
We
it's
literally
the front
just
house
have
monitors.
the flown wedges or the side fills usually, and your front wedges. And we don't have right now. We're not using in-ears, so it's just literally we're trusting
Wedges.
our monitor guy or a girl
Mm-hmm.
to get the stage sound good, and put a bit of his guitar over here, a bit of mine over here, and we cross around and we just go for it.
I love it. I love it totally. I'm gonna go back to the chat. We're at 10:30 here. I want to come back and with the last question I want to ask you, talking about the new album for the Demented that's coming out. You can tell us a little bit when that's.
VH, Eddie, but go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. A couple more questions over from the chat. I'm actually just going to say hi to everybody because we're running a little bit behind. But yeah, we'll talk about what it was about Eddie Van Halen that really got you hooked. And I definitely don't want to leave without talking about the new album, when it's coming, and the singles are out there right now. So Bruce is jumping in saying hi. Frank McNell's jumping in saying hi. Let me see. Dactar, FNAF Gamer says, Eric, what did you think of my guitar on Instagram? Awesome stuff, as always. Let me see here. Cloreen Baconskin says, this guy is awesome. Thanks so much. So we have a big fan for sure. Let me see here. But Darren more rock and roll saying, hey, everyone. Let me see here. And yes, Tactical 16 says, you've commented on this before, but it's unfortunate now the cost of some concerts, now what it was worth back in the 80s. You go back and see the bands in the 80s for like $7-8, and now it's like, $100 minimum. Let me see here. Cloreen Bacon, nothing good comes easy, so true. Darren Moore, great points being made here. Let me see here. Chris Jones, Clone Trooper, the 10,000 hour rule. Rob Ashby, I'm a rhythm guitarist. Yes, and that's the thing. Some people just have to say, I'm going to be a rhythm guitarist and own it. And you know, it's not cheating out. It's doing a duty that needs to be done. And a lot of people they want the glory of the lead guy. Malcolm Young is a perfect example. Try to play like him, and a lot of people will laugh at that. Try it. Just go ahead, go to try it, and hold a whole night of doing what he does, and see what you can do.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Malcolm's the man. I mean, he wrote the songs.
That's right. Let me see if I miss anyone else. Just trying to make sure I didn't miss anyone's names here. Almost to the bottom of the chat. Scroll down just a little bit more. I think Showman Blues is jumping in saying hi. Bobby Clipper. Just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone. If I have, Spanky McAllister is jumping in. So guys and girls, thank you so very, very much for watching tonight. I'm going to come back with a couple questions for Jeff. Basically, I definitely don't want to leave you without the album talk. And in a short story, obviously everyone that comes to this show is very enticed by Eddie Van Halen. That's why I stick his name on the show. I mean, I love the man to death. What is it about Eddie Van Halen that just got you at then and now?
Well, I think the fact that, like, I always have divided guitar players into three categories again: lead, rhythm, and songwriting. I just, for some reason, I see three things.
I like that.
And there's guys out there that are phenomenal. Like, you've got Steve Vai or Malmsteen, and they've captured that lead thing. Now, some would argue, what about rhythm? Okay, I'm sure they're good rhythm players too, but the thing that stands out is their solos. And then there's the third one, songwriting. So if you compare Malcolm Young to Yngwie Malmsteen, I would say right away that the songwriter is Malcolm Young and the shredder is Yngwie Malmsteen. To me, I would sort of rate and rank my favorite guitar players in all kinds of music based on those three. So if I was asked, what's your favorite guitar player or the best one to you, I'd have to say for metal music, I would say Glenn Tipton. And that, yes, there's better lead players technically and this and that, but he's got songwriting. If you look at the catalog of Judas Priest, his songwriting's phenomenal for how many songs he's written. His lead playing, even on Painkiller, when he got that kick in the butt from Scott Travis. There's so many. Hang on, I gotta press a button. Yeah, there's just so many things about Glenn Tipton that are amazing. Songwriting, soloing, style. He changed his blues style up to the Painkiller style. He was amazing. In the mid-career, he could switch styles of lead guitar playing all of a sudden. It was phenomenal. And so he covered the three for metal for me at the top. Angus, of course, is amazing, blues player, but the writer was Malcolm, right?
Sure.
The overall one, and it's not because I'm on the show, obviously, this is a fact to younger people that don't know this. It is a fact. I'm sorry. Eddie, you could compare him when all these people compare in polls and online and all this stuff. But the bottom line is his rhythm was groundbreaking, unbelievable. His solos, of course, were taking guitar somewhere where it never went before. He basically took blues and Hendrix and all this other stuff and turned it into a different direction completely, and that nobody had ever done before. And then, songwriting, what can you say? We all know what a songwriter is. So he's the guy that had all three at the top of the list. You can say anybody else you want. You could tell me James Hetfield. I'll say he's got the songwriting and the rhythm, one of the top dudes, but not the solo. You look at Kirk Hammett. You look at the Slayer guys, Hanneman and King. Yeah, they got the rhythm chops and the songwriting chops. Soloing's a little different. You look at who's going to argue about, okay, you'll take a look at Steve Vai. Sure. Like I said, lead chops, good songwriter, good rhythm player. You see what I'm getting at, right?
I do.
And you can, if you keep the three categories in mind and see who's got all three of them, you're actually looking at guys like Alexi Laiho from Children of Bodom and the guys in Trivium, which I never thought I would say.
Sure.
But they've got all three. They can write songs, they can play rhythm great, and they can play solos great. So Randy Rhoads was a good example, writing, soloing, and and lead playing, right?
Sure.
Writing, rhythm, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, all three.
So Eddie's the top of that. And that's the thing that blew my mind in the earlier days, that people would concentrate only on his solos, and nobody that I knew as a kid understood the genius of his rhythm playing as well as songwriting.
You nailed it. You totally nailed it. And that's the thing where so many people overlook it. I had a guest on the show a while back, Brian Young. He played guitar in Dave's band when Dave went kind of solo for a while there, was doing the Sam and Dave thing and all that kind of thing. And they played all the Van Halen hits. And Brian Young looks at the set list and says, Dave, how come you don't have I'm the One on there? Like, I mean, that's a great song. And Dave actually said, do you know that one? He goes, our last guitar player couldn't play it. And Brian says, I love that song. It's one of my favorites. And of course he could play it. So that's that shuffle, that swing, that you're patting your head, rubbing your tummy again. And it all goes back to, I didn't coin this thing, but I say it a lot. That shuffle and the swing comes from three people. Comes from Eddie and Alex playing together 24/7 with no bass player as kids. Number two comes from Jan, the father, and comes from David Lee Roth with his repertoire of R&B when he brought it to the band. So that has a huge catalyst to what become the shuffle and that music and rhythm chops to die for. But let's end up the evening here with a brand new record coming. And see, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm not going to lie and say I'm a fan of a lot of the heavy metal music that's out there. I'm like the Van Halen, I'm the Scorpions, I'm the Kiss, I'm that kind of stuff. A lot of the heavier stuff, like Maiden, is about my heaviest I get into, and Metallica, and that's about my heaviest. But I like what I'm hearing from your new single. Tell us, and I like it a lot, and I'm just going to be honest. Tell people what they can expect, new fans, old fans, what they can expect, what old fans can expect, and what new guys and girls coming in might discover what's coming out. And coming November, is it November 10th?
I think 3rd.
Okay, so November. So coming November. What? So for the Demented, right? And tell us what they can expect with this album.
It's our 16th studio record. First album was in '89. Basically, started out as like a thrash, sort of at the time technical, not so much compared to bands nowadays, but so like a thrashing technical band with a bit of heavy metal in there. The second one brought in a little bit more of the melodic and a little bit more heavy metal, and then it changed as the albums progressed. I would try different things. You'd have love songs and ballads and instrumentals and melodic things that wouldn't sound like they should be on a heavy thrash metal album.
Sure.
You have classical guitar intros. You'd have just everything I wanted to put in there, and anything. And some of it was good, some of it wasn't, maybe looking back. I mean, definitely some wasn't and some was. So it changed. But the root of all this stuff is basically blues, heavy metal, thrash metal, speed metal, whatever it's all called. And I could have an AC/DC song 1 minute and then a Van Halen tapping rip off the next. So it changes. And a lot of fans couldn't follow that because it wasn't one sound and one style. The Europeans got it and went with it and said, hey, it's not all about aggression, or it's not all about rock or blues or this or that. I think where we've came now is I've kind of on the 16th studio record now that is called For the Demented, like you said. It's came to, you might not like the whole thing. It's back to sort of like the thrashier stuff, because our more unknown stuff in the States, which is most of our career, had everything. You would listen to it and go, that can't be a band called Annihilator. This is like a ballad or a rock song or a hard rock song. This one is kind of in a way for our European fans, in the sense that it's back to what I think they liked about our first two records. So it wasn't so much an intentional thing to go back, because that usually fails. I mean, it really, going back and trying to recapture that nostalgia, it almost always fails. It was more like I brought our bass player in to steer me in the right direction and say no, yes, or work on that. And that was all it took to sort of get me back to what he thought people got into Annihilator for in the early days. So we're giving the Europeans, so to speak, hopefully a treat. The pre-orders are selling out over there.
Nice. And
we just did one video for a song, a lovely, beautiful title that your mother would like, called Twisted Lobotomy.
I love it. The swimming pool kind of a set too.
It's a total thrashback thing and flashback thing. Thrashback, that's cool.
I like that. Did you just coin that?
I'm sure it's been around before.
Okay. I like that thrashback. That was good. I like that one.
Flashback, that is good.
That is good.
But yeah, it's basically for guitar players out there. Check it out, because you'll never be able to play it. It's too fast.
I love it.
But I'll slow down a little bit on the next record.
Okay.
It's just letting loose and playing some stuff that I still love listening to and playing. So it's going to be a lot of fun this time. Got lots of tours. We got tours with Testament coming up, at least one in Europe, and a band called Death Angel, of course, from the States. And we got our headline stuff. We always do a couple of headline tours over there. full summer festival runs coming up, and just what we usually do, but it's going to be more exciting this time, I think.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Lots of good comments in the chat. Jeffrey Monroe saying, please play Little Jeff if we have time. So what I'm going to do, Jeffrey, I'm going to have Jeff back on again. We'll get you in the new year, early 2018, if there's something that's not happening in the wintertime. If you have some downtime, get you on, maybe do some fun playing, and we'll get you back to do that. Awesome. But I'll be down in the description of the video as well too. I've got links to Jeff's properties, the website, and everything like that as well too. It'll give you information on getting the pre-order on the new album. Before I let you go, on your YouTube channel, you have a really, really cool cover of Romeo Delight, and I want people to check this out. And I said this to Jeff off the air and before, and I'll say it to everyone on the air right now. Jeff nails it. He nails the tone, nails the notes of Eddie Van Halen, but also totally owns it in his own personal thing. Some people will copy it, and it's really cool, but you have your own stake on that classic song. I love that song because it's full of, pardon my French, but piss and vinegar. What was it about that song that struck you as the one we got to cover?
That was just the Women and Children first album. Of course we had the first album, and we had Van Halen too, Beautiful Girls. We had so many classic albums, Fair Warning. I mean, just so many, Unchained, Mean Street, blah, blah. You got everything, any kind of music you like. Am I still there?
You are. Yep, I got you.
Yeah, good. Basically, the one that did it for me was Women and Children First, and Romeo Delight was, to me, and a lot of fans I think too, was the standout. And that, I think that ended up appealing to what would be my heavier roots later on. It was just such an aggressive attitude by Roth on that song in the band for the time. It wasn't heavy or, like in the sense of music is now. There was something about taking whiskey at the party night. I'm looking for somebody to squeeze, There was something about the guitar and the drumming and the bass playing and the singing that was just so badass. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was just badass. And it turns out, if you listen to the song now and crank it, it is so heavy. I mean, that is such a heavy song.
I can't listen to the record without in my mind hearing, I forgot the effing words. Dave would do that live. Obviously, it became his shtick after a while. But it's just almost like, you get a skip in a record, you know when to expect it. And I can't listen to that song without waiting for Dave to say, I forgot the, blah, 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 right? I love that. Yeah. But you nailed that one. So guys and girls, check that out. And you will thank me later. And you don't even have to send me emails to thank me, but I'm going to tell you got to check it out. And then you have to, if you're a new fan to Annihilator, you have to go back and discover this stuff. Get the pre-order on the record. You're going to love it. I think we'll wrap it up here. Jeff, I want to say thank you huge. There's a few questions we didn't get to, but I'm going to have you back. We'll get some playing in when you feel up to doing that. And I will say goodbye to you off the air, but I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And Jeff, as you being a new guest of the show, I always like to tell people, my guests, that we like to try to be the warm-up band for the weekend. So between Annihilator and myself pushing the buttons, we want to warm up your weekend. Beautiful weekend here in Canada. I'm sure it's good in most places. If it's not, people still recuperating from the horrific hurricanes and things like that. Wishing all the best. Please try to help where you can in those situations. But on a positive note, have a fantastic weekend, everyone. Jeff, I'll let you say goodbye to everyone as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, obviously, Eric. But of course, thank you to everybody watching. I'm going to become a faithful member watching this thing too, because I just found out about this through Eric a few weeks ago. And I'm going to be tuning in every week too. So thank you very much. If you get a chance, at least check out Annihilator's Romeo Delight cover at a minimum, if you don't want to check out the band.
I will.
Thank you very much for putting up with this.
Awesome. This was great. It was a fun evening, and we went almost 2 hours tonight, which is phenomenal. I love it. It's usually 90 minutes, but you know what the thing is? It went very nicely, and I'm very happy. So guys and girls, have a fantastic weekend. I'm going to say goodbye to Jeff off the air. Don't go away.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Rock and roll. See you real soon. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Hey, my name is Eric, and I'm playing the Frankenstrat guitar.
Video production services provided by Design 39 Media. Visit design39media.com for all your website, photography, and video production needs.